As you know, and I'm not hawking it because it doesn't matter, I'm writing another book. My last book was Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. Don't close your eyes. Stay with me. That came out July, August 2017. So it came out the end of the summer of 2017. It was dedicated to my wonderful parents, Jack and Norma. But as I watch this debate with the Neanderthal left, the Marxists, I think to myself, we need to go over this again briefly. This issue of liberty. What is liberty? Now, those of you who are diehard Levin fans and you listen every evening, we've talked about this before, but, you know, I can bring a different kind of emphasis to it. And, of course, I've written about it, and so people can read it with their own eyes. And one of the fundamental things you need to understand is this notion of liberty. The left talks about liberty in the same sentence as government. We talk about liberty in the same sentence as individualism. There was a brilliant man, there have been many brilliant people, but there was a brilliant man, a Russian-British political theorist, philosopher. He was also reporter in some respects, Isaiah Berlin. And I mentioned him in my book, Rediscovering Americans. And he lived from 1909 to 1997. So for an idiot like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, he's irrelevant. If his name's not Marx or Solinsky, she's not interested. But she's not the standard by which we inform ourselves. And he wrote an essay in 1958 in which it was a brilliant essay, in which he was talking about the idea of liberty. And he came up with this notion of positive liberty and negative liberty. This has been confused by many people because the words may not make sense unless you really think about them. We say positive. Oh, it must be positive to believe in positive liberty. It must be negative to believe in negative liberty. It's the opposite. Unless you really read this stuff, digest it, think about it, you don't understand it. It's like somebody putting words in front of your face. What is positive liberty? Here's what Berlin wrote. Self-government may, on the whole, provide a better guarantee of the preservation of civil liberties than other regimes, and has been defended as such by libertarians. But there is no necessary connection between individual liberty and democratic rule. Now let's stop right there. Why am I bringing this up again? Nancy Pelosi. As I told you the other night, and there were others, Jefferson used to talk about the tyranny of the legislature. Bastiat did too. Just because you have a legislature, in and of itself, is not good enough. That's why we have a constitution with limits and specific powers designated for the legislature, Congress, and for the other branches of government. So he's saying here a democracy, democratic rule, is not in and of itself enough. This is important. Stay with me. The answer to the question, who governs me, is distinct from the question, how far does government interfere with me? Make sense, Mr. Producer? Who governs me is one question, but how far does government interfere with me is a separate question. He says it is in this difference that the great contrast between the two concepts of negative, and I'll get to it, and positive liberty in the end consist. For the positive sense of liberty comes to light if we try to answer the question not, what am I free to do or be, but by whom am I ruled? Or who is to say what I am and what I am not, to be or do? So you can have a so-called democracy and a legislature, and they say, you know, we're going to tax you at 70%. That's not liberty. The connection between democracy and individual liberty is a good deal more tenuous than it seemed to many advocates of both. The desire to be governed by myself, or at any rate to participate in the process by which my life is to be controlled, may be as deep a wish as that for a free area for action, and perhaps historically older. But it is not a desire for the same thing. So different is it, indeed, as to have led, in the end, to the great clash of ideologies that dominates our world. For it is this, the positive conception of liberty, not freedom from government, freedom from control, freedom from authoritarianism, freedom from crime, but freedom to lead one prescribed form of life, which the adherents of the negative notion represent as being at times no better than a specious disguise for brutal tyranny. All right, so negative liberty is your Bill of Rights. It's not saying what the government can do. It's saying what the government cannot do to you. It negates authoritarianism. It negates government overreach. Hence, negative liberty. Positive liberty, again, it's not an emotional or psychological issue. Positive liberty is active. Well, what can I do? And who tells me what I can do? Well, you know, we have a legislature. They can tell you what to do. No, but they're telling me to do things that destroy my liberty, that destroy my business, that destroy all these things. You and I embrace negative liberty, the Bill of Rights. No, the government may not take my gun. No, the government may not interfere with my free speech. No, the government may not take my interfere with my religion. No, I have due process rights. No, I am presumed innocent. Negative liberty. Leave me alone. I have unalienable rights. I am an individual. And I wrote about this, as you know, some time ago. I certainly wasn't the first. That's why I cite my sources. Berlin describes the mindset of modern progressives and their philosophical patrons, declaring that in exercising their positive freedom idea to be all you want to be, the danger is that, quote, the real self, he writes, may be conceived as something wider than the individual, as the term is normally understood, as a social whole of which the individual is an element or aspect. A tribe, a race, a church, a state, the great society of the living and the dead, and yet unborn. This entity is then identified as being the true self, which by imposing its collective, he's talking about Marxism and Hegelism, or organic single will upon its recalcitrant members, that's you, achieves its own and therefore their higher freedom. This is exactly what Hegel wrote. That's his point. The collective, the state, uniformity, conformity, centralized government, autocracy. This is how you realize your individualism is part of a whole. Positive liberty. Negative liberty. No. I'm an individual. I will give you some authority, but beyond that, you're molesting my liberty. The perils, he writes, of using organic metaphors, general will of the people, I'm giving examples, general welfare of the people, the community generally. He writes, to justify the coercion of some men by others in order to raise them to the higher level of positive freedom have often been pointed out. But what gives such plausibility as it has to this kind of language is that we recognize that it is possible and at times justifiable to coerce men in the name of some goal, let us say justice or public health, which they would, if they were more enlightened themselves, pursue, but do not, because they are blind or ignorant or corrupt. This renders it easy for me to conceive of myself as coercing others for their own sake, and their, not my interest. They would not resist me if they were rational, you see, because I am wise, and I understand their interest, even if they don't. I may go on to claim a good deal more than this. I may declare that they are actually aiming at what, in their benighted state, they can consciously resist, because there exists within them an occult entity, their latent rational will, or their true purpose, Hegel. And that this entity, although it is belied by all that they overtly feel and do and say, is their real self, Hegel, of which the poor empirical self in space and time may know nothing or little, and that this inner spirit is the only self that deserves to have its wishes taken into account. He's describing communism, fascism. Once I take this view, in other words, I'm not really talking about me or helping me. I want to help these people, and they know I'm right. In their inner soul, they know I'm right, even if they think I'm wrong. I'm in a position to ignore the actual wishes of men and societies, to bully, oppress, torture them in the name and on behalf of their real selves, in the secure knowledge that whatever is the true goal of man must be identified with his freedom, positive freedom of the state. Now you understand Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the kooks. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Listen, you can read it if you're interested enough in the negative, positive liberty arguments, you can read it in Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. It's probably at your library or what have you. It's a very important point. That's why it is so appealing to young leftists, or people who maybe don't have views but become leftists, socialists, and so forth, because the deviousness of the left, of the Pelosi's and her ilk, is that they are able to portray police-state government and authoritarianism as liberty. Sure, you should have free health care. Sure, you should have free college. And we, the government, we're going to provide it. And we know what happens. It collapses. But see, this is how you can really effectuate the fullness of your individuality. Become part of the community. The community will take care of you. We will give you things. That's not liberty. But the way they pose it, it's a positive form of liberty. We, the government, are going to free you so you can do these things. Real liberty, or negative liberty, I would have called it real liberty, is, why don't you leave me alone? I'm an individual. I don't want to surrender myself. I don't want to surrender my freedom. I don't want to surrender my wealth to you. I'll take care of my future. I'll be back.